Mr. Sean Clarke. Mr. Clarke is going to present on limiting climate change through spirituality. Mr. Clarke is the editor of the Spiritual Science Research Foundation, SSRF. That is ssrf.org. A leading spiritual research website. The website is devoted to publishing unique knowledge gained through spiritual research about the spiritual dimension of how it affects our lives. Sean has an MBA. Hello. Just let me read out the whole thing. Sean has an MBA from the prestigious Monash Mount Eliza Business School in Melbourne, Australia, and has worked as a strategy analyst in .coms in Hong Kong and Australia. So I understand Sean is coming from Australia. His keen desire to know about the spiritual dimension led him to give up his career 15 years ago and live in the Spiritual Research Center and ashram in Goa. All right, that's an interesting place. Here, as part of the spiritual research team, he has been studying and researching various spiritual phenomena and publishing it on the SSRF website. In 2014, with the formation of Maharshi Adhyatma Vishwavidyalay, also known as the Maharshi University of Spirituality, he joined the spiritual research team and is a part of the faculty for spiritual research workshops. He's a key member of the team preparing the research presentation for over 60 conferences worldwide. So, Mr. Sean, I would now request you to take up your presentation. You have total 15 minutes, and then this will be followed by Q&A for about 5 minutes. So, over to you.
Thank you very much. Can you see my screen and my video?
Yes, we can see that.
Okay, that's great. So namaskar and good morning to everyone. I would like to thank the Institute for Science and Spirituality and ISKCON Delhi for this opportunity. Now, we all know that the Earth's vital signs are not in a good shape. 2020 was the warmest year on record in more than a century. CO2 levels are at their highest ever. The September Arctic ice is declining. The intensity of extreme weather events and natural disasters are on the rise. Climate changes are being viewed as an existential threat to humanity, just second to a full-blown nuclear war. And this is one of the reasons why scientists have shifted the doomsday clock to just 100 seconds to midnight. Now, the Paris Accord in 2015 was hailed the world over, and people's minds at that time, it was like the climate crisis had been averted. Yet 5.5 years onwards, we are nowhere near the goals that were set. With 2020 being the hottest year on record, CO2 levels currently at their peak, more extreme weather events than ever before, and a pandemic gripping the world, we can safely say that the crisis is far from being averted. And I guess the obvious question is, has the world's community done enough since the Paris Accord? But an even more pertinent question is, are we correctly assessing the real causes of the dire situation that we are all in? Now, the research team at the university, led by His Holiness Dr. Athavale, has 40 years of spiritual research experience, and it specializes in conducting research into how the spiritual dimension and spiritual vibrations affect our lives. And if there's one thing that we've learned from our research, it is that when investigating the causes of any phenomenon, one needs to also include the spiritual dimension. And this is because the cause of any phenomenon can have its root cause in either the physical, psychological, and/or spiritual dimension. And the important point is this, that the bigger the phenomenon, like climate change, the more likely it is to have its root cause in the spiritual. Now, normally climate experts would not look beyond the physical causes when investigating climate change. Why should they? They've not been trained to do so. But I would like to share with you a line of thought from an ancient Sanskrit scripture, the Charak Samhita. And I quote, "When there is an increase in unrighteousness, the signs are reflected in a reduced quality of life, increased epidemics, in our case, pandemics, a spate of natural disasters, along with war and conflict, eventually leading to the annihilation of communities." It describes a situation that we are very similar to what we are in. Now, some environmentalists are thinking the same way, and James Speth could not have put it better, and I quote, "I used to think that the top environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. And I thought that 30 years of good science could address these problems. But I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with these, we need a cultural and spiritual transformation. And we scientists do not know how to do that." So the Charak Samhita clearly suggests that the root cause as an increase in unrighteousness. Now, when there is unrighteousness, there is always an increase in negative vibrations or spiritual pollution. And this is mainly due to man's thoughts and actions, and also due to subtle negative forces. There is an increase in people's personality defects, ego and pride, a lack of spirituality. Materialism becomes a new religion, and there is a dominance of selfishness and greed, and a basic disregard for the environment. This is the nature of unrighteousness or adhyatma. Now, in the Bhagavad Gita, Shri Krishna talks about these three vibrations in the form of the three subtle components. As per the science of spirituality, there are three subtle components that are in everything: sattva, raja, and tama. When there is a predominance of the sattva component, it gives rise to spiritually pure vibrations. On the other hand, an increase in the tama component due to unrighteousness gives rise to spiritually impure vibrations or negative vibrations. And raja is the component that is associated with action and provides momentum to the other two components. Now, when there is heightened spiritual impurity, it negatively impacts the five absolute cosmic principles of earth, water, fire, air, and ether. And these principles control the climate. As a result, when the affected earth, water, fire, and air, ether principles, it gives rise to weird weather patterns and natural disasters. And this table shows the disasters that are caused due to each cosmic principle. So if the absolute earth principle is affected, it results in earthquakes. If the absolute water principle is negatively affected, it can give rise to either floods or a lack of water, such as a drought. So now we wanted to test if the subtle negative vibrations had indeed gone up in the world. Now, one way of understanding this, actually the best way of understanding this, is through sixth sense or extrasensory perception. However, nowadays, with the advancements in aura and energy scanners, such as this universal aura scanner, we are able to obtain in real time feedback as to whether an object emits positive or negative vibrations and the distance that it is emitted. So using the UAS, we conducted a landmark study of the subtle vibrations emitted by soil and water samples from around the world. And as of Feb 2020, before the pandemic, we had taken subtle energy readings of close to 1,000 soil and water samples from 32 countries. Now, these soil and water samples were collected from a wide variety of places. And I would like to take this opportunity to share with you some of the insights from this study, which will give you a spiritual perspective on the state of the world. So, firstly, more than 80% of the samples collected from outside India and around the world were negative. some of the samples in the top 10 negative samples had negative auras in excess of 20 meters. And the only country that had a higher proportion of positivity was India. We also took readings of some 20 samples over a period of a year, that means between 2018 and 2019. And what we found was that there was a sharp escalation in the size of the negative aura from the samples from anywhere between doubling up to 700%. And this is a water sample collected from the River Inn from Innsbruck in Austria. So apart from the 700% increase, what is alarming is that in 1 year, it also registered a UV component in the water sample, which denotes negativity of a much higher intensity. Now, the positive news was that the areas that were considered positive or that were measured as positive, even though there were few, between 2018 and 2019, it increased tremendously. So it was almost like a polarization of negativity and positivity that was taking place in the world. Now, another point that we learned was that physically clean does not mean spiritually clean. And I'd like you to look at these samples of water that I have on my screen. If you were to choose a sample, which would you go for? Now, most would choose sample 1 or 5 and dismissing number 3 and 4. But actually, you'd be surprised to know that sample 1 and sample 5 both have a negative aura. In fact, sample 1 is amongst the top 10 most negative samples in the world and was procured from the premises of a popular historical monument. While the muddy water samples was from an Indian river flowing next to that monument and emitted high positive vibrations. So ironically, people flock to see the monument and pay very little attention to the holy river flowing next to it. So this brings up actually another issue which we need to understand, and that is that we need to promote areas of positivity instead of those that emit negativity and that adversely affect people who visit it. Now, in this slide, we have various readings of samples of water taken from the same municipal water supply. On the left are samples in the vicinity of the ashram, our ashram, and on the right are samples within our premises. Whilst there was no negativity in any of the samples, you can see that the water, that as soon as the water entered the ashram, the positive aura in the water increased substantially. And it is a clear indication of the positive effect of the practice of spirituality on the elements such as the water and the environment. Now, this is a picture of 2 flames produced during the Somyag Yajna. And one on the left, which is chaotic and turbulent and uncontrolled, is from a Somyag conducted in an average place by an average priest. And the one on the right is from a yajna or a sacred fire conducted under the guidance of Saint Nanaji Kale at the Spiritual Research Ashram Center and Ashram in Goa. And you can see the difference and how luminous and smooth and controlled the flame is. This is another indication of how spiritual positivity and the spiritual level of people can affect the behavior of the elements. Now, like these 2 examples, we have many examples of how people, the flora, the fauna, the environment, by spiritual practice. The point I'm trying to make is that until intergovernmental agreements, such as the Paris Accord, include measures to decrease spiritual negativity, the cosmic elements will continue to manifest erratically, and extreme weather and other such adverse phenomena will continue to escalate in the world. Limiting climate change will be very difficult at this rate. So what can be done? Now, since the current state of the world is primarily due to spiritual reasons, the solutions to come out of it should also be spiritual in nature. Suppose the whole world were to practice spirituality as per universal principles, it would definitely help to mitigate the devastating effect of the heightened spiritual pollution we have nowadays. But alas, this utopian possibility is but a pipe dream. And therefore, we are all collectively on a road where we will have to witness much change and destruction. The practical reality in this situation is that each of us can only help ourselves, and this is best done by starting or increasing our own spiritual practice. An easy yet effective form of spiritual practice is chanting the name of God, and saints have guided to chant Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, as it is the most spiritually beneficial chant for the current period up to 2023. We've also given a total of 8 steps of spiritual practice as provided on our website. I encourage you to have a look at it. It'll really help you in your practice. And I would also encourage everyone who is earnest about their spiritual growth to look up the section on personality defect removal as spiritual practice. Now, this is pioneered by His Holiness Dr. Athawale, and practicing this method helps to reduce defects such as anger, jealousy, selfishness, and greed, because removing such personality defects helps to provide a very strong base for faster spiritual growth. Spiritual practice changes the energy of the house for the better, and it also attracts God's energy, divine energy. These 2 bottles are water samples from adjacent flats in a building in Mumbai, and they both look the same, but they both have very different UAS readings. The one on the left emitted positive vibrations and was from the house of a family of seekers who were all practicing spirituality. The other sample on the right emitted negativity, and it was from the next door neighbor's house who have no interest in spirituality. Now, when we undertake spiritual practice sincerely, we create spiritual positivity within us and around us. God feels like protecting us and such seekers. And sages have said that earnest efforts for spiritual growth will result in divine intervention for the protection of devotees in these turbulent times.
You have
Bottom
1
line,
minute.
just about finishing with my bottom line. And the bottom line is that only by practicing spirituality can one survive this difficult period that we have coming ahead of us. Thank you very much. I'm open for questions now.
Yeah, so that's wonderful. Hold on to that bottom line slide. Bring it back.
Done?
No, please bring the slide back. Yes, the bottom line is that only by practicing spirituality can one survive in this difficult period. That's the period, So, one moment. So, nicely put, Sean. The bottom line is that basically the chaos is so much, the aura out there is so much, and there is so much of, anxiety and restlessness and whole lot of other things. People are suffering for a variety of reasons, and it's basically by practicing spirituality that one can survive this difficult period. Not only the period of corona, but the period of materialism, the paradigm that the people are following. So this is the ultimate objective of this conference also. Ending this conference, and the senior scientists and people from all walks of life can get immunization from all the problems by following spirituality, and not just Covishield and Covaxin, but spirituality. Yeah, so spirituality is the Covishield for the attack of materialism and the Maya. So
Correct.
with that, thank you very much. I would like to thank you for making a very nice presentation and bringing the bottom line in a perfect way. We will have a couple of questions. So let me see what are the questions coming. How to, yeah, so one moment. How, from where does it start? Can you tell us more about UAS? Okay, so somebody is asking, if you have any question, yeah, can you tell us more about UAS technology?
Yeah, so the UAS is an instrument actually developed by Dr. Manna Murthy, an Indian nuclear scientist. And what it does is it helps to understand whether objects have, positive vibrations or negative vibrations. So what actually happens, if you see my hands out here, the UAS arms are closed initially. And what we do is we put something or a small little sample of that person we're trying to measure. So let's say, for example, if you're trying to measure a person, we would take a saliva sample and put it into the UAS. So the UAS kind of syncs up with that person's vibrations. And initially, the arms are closed, but as soon as it detects a vibration, the arms open out. And when the arms open out to over 180 degrees, that's the point in time the operator can start walking backwards. Now, when the operator walks backwards, he continues to walking backwards until the arms begin to close. When the arms of the UAS begin to close, that means that the aura has ended out there, or it can't detect any aura further. So that actually, every aura reading of the UAS is under 4 components. There are 2 negative energy components. One is called IR, the other one is called UV. UV being the more detrimental negative component. Then it measures for a positive aura, and then finally the total measured aura of the person.
Okay. What parameter is measured using? Okay, you have explained this. So how is the parameter? How the parameter is categorized into possible? I think this is also you brought out. Any validation study? Any validation study on this? What you explained?
Yeah. So this is very important. See, the UAS is an instrument that measures subtle vibrations. But just to remember, the only tool to really measure subtle vibrations is extrasensory perception. To be able to perceive sattva rajatama can only be really done through 6th sense. And it's almost instantaneously that you can actually measure it if a person has advanced 6th sense. Now the UAS, all credit to it, is able to pick up these things to some extent. And we've done over 10,000 readings over a 5 or 6 year period. And by and large, the accuracy of the instrument is actually pretty good. There are problems and times when it can go off, and we are aware of these times. It depends on the operator. It depends on the circumstances around the operator. So we take care of all of that. And of course, we cross-check all the UAS readings with 6th sense readings to make sure that we are going ahead and getting the proper results.
Okay, so the next question, I think that gets answered, that how does this technology work and is it backed by research? So you have done plenty of research. Okay, the next one is from Dr. Mamta Mahanti. Sir, how could we test the energy of a house through water? Is there any simple method you can share? I'm aware communication also happens through water since it flows. So what are your comments?
See, what we have found with water, and we've done many experiments on water, water is one of those things that can very easily absorb both positivity and negativity. So in fact, we've done experiments where people have done, held a glass of water and actually done namjap or chanting the name of God over it. And the quality of the water actually, the spiritual qualities of the water actually begin to change. So also, if people do spiritual practice within their house, the whole vibrations of the house change. The thoughts of the people begin to change. And this is another source of research that we've done, is that the research in the premises, one of the leading causes of why a house will emit positive or negative vibrations, about 60 to 70% of the reasons will be actually the residents in the house, and whether there's infighting, whether there are bad thoughts or good thoughts. These really are the main criteria for why people actually get affected with negative vibrations or positive vibrations in a house.
Okay, good. There is a question from Dr. Ramanuj Banerjee. How positive and negative vibration of soil and water is correlated and affect with human behavior?
So this is a very good question, actually. And it's a kind of a looping effect, because what happens is man's thoughts and actions and deeds sends out vibrations. These vibrations get caught by the environment and the soil and the water. Now, at least water has somewhere to go, it flows, but soil, it's all there. So the vibrations just stick into the ground. Now, there are also subtle forces that come into play. They also increase the negativity, and the soil then goes back to affect mankind again. And then mankind behavior becomes a little more aggressive, little more irrational, little more depressive. And this goes back to affect the soil again. And that's why you saw that in the current years, between 2018 and 2019, this was even before the pandemic, the increases in soil, the negativity in the soil was, 700%.
So I'm responding on your behalf, how to create positive aura in difficult times, and basically through spirituality by chanting the name of the God.
Yes, absolutely. But I would like to just add one thing to that. And what we have realized is that practicing a spiritually pure way of life can also help people to create positivity in their life. And this is across every dimension, whether it is how you dress, what you eat, what you drink, how your hairstyle is. And we've done tremendous research on that. In fact, in over 30 to 40 disciplines, we've done research into how to bring positivity into that discipline, whether it's art, music, dance, entertainment, the movies we watch. Every single thing has the ability to either add to your aura or take away from your aura. Very important point that I'd like to make. And thank you for asking that question, because if you're not adding to your aura, you're most likely subtracting from it. And those have long-term adverse repercussions.
So thank you very much, Sean. I think your equipment must be mass produced and marketed globally so that people can measure and increase their aura.
Yes, this instrument is available in the market.